Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to the joint hearing that we're having between Revenue and Taxation Committee as well as Sub-4 related to Board of Equalization. We have a number of issues to discuss today, including the hearing about the administration of the cigarette and tobacco tax, which is part of the work that we do on Subcommittee 4, beginning with some of the efforts that started last year, as well as learning about various other programs that Board of Equalization administers. We have several panels to go through, and I know time is limited, so we're going to try to keep it brief to about an hour and a half. With that, I'd like to have Mr. Ting give his opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We know we have a lot of hearings on the Capitol, so we're trying to be a little more efficient since you spend a lot of time in front of us. Very excited about today's hearing. I know we have two distinguished members of the board here today. In particular, two areas that I was interested in, besides obviously the budget area, was the analysis of the underground economy and also looking at how we do our outreach services so we can obviously best serve our taxpayers. And with that, if I could ask Mr. Runner and Ms. Ma to come forward and give a few introductory remarks.
Why don't we go here, because we're going to actually stay up. Well, welcome. We're glad to be here and give a couple of just some beginning remarks in terms of our issues at the BOE. We're glad to be able to come, and we thought it appropriate as a new legislative year starts and new members are gathered, and for us to come and meet and be a part of this discussion. So we're glad to do that. I think in particular, Mr. Chair, we are going to be talking specifically coming up a little bit later in regards to the outreach issues. And I know you've got a fine group of panelists coming up within the BOE to talk about some of the other more technical issues too. So appreciate that.
Thank you very much, members, for having this hearing. I also will chime in a little bit on our outreach program. I have one going on right now in San Luis Obispo, and my team members say that it is very, very successful, and they're very impressed with it, so I will chime in a little bit later about some of the other programs.
Great. So I'd like to invite Edna Murphy to provide an overview of the BOE budget and staff. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Edna Murphy, and I'm the Deputy Director for Administration for the Board of Equalization. Established in 1879, thank you, by a constitutional amendment, the BOE was initially charged with the responsibility for ensuring that county property tax assessment practices were equal and uniform throughout the state. Currently, the tax programs administered by the BOE are concentrated in 4 general areas: sales and use tax, property tax, special taxes, and the tax appellate program. In fiscal year 2013, BOE administered tax and fees generating $60.4 billion to provide essential services for the people of California. I wanted to start by giving an update on the BOE's current budget and staffing figures. The proposed governor budget for fiscal year 2015-16 includes 4,830.3 positions and $578 million. This is a decrease in staffing of approximately 0.4%, but an increase in funding of approximately 2.36% over fiscal year 14-15. Over the past 3 years, the BOE has had several major proposals that have impacted our budget, including rent increases, tax gap, and the initial cross proposal. In addition, we have also had the continuation of some successful limited-term programs, including the Southern California Settlements and Appeals Unit, the Joint Operations Center, and the National Gas Program. During this time, the BOE has been impacted by some major pieces of legislation that includes the State Responsibility Area Fire Prevention Fee, the Use Tax Nexus, the Timber Regulation and Forest Restoration Fee, and the expansion of the Oil Spill Prevention Program. The BOE has also been tasked with legislation that has not been fully funded, including but not limited to the Proposition 30 adjustments, manufacturing partial exemption, and the Managed Care Organization Tax Program. While BOE does not currently have any BCPs for fiscal year 15-16, we do expect there to be a spring finance letter introduced to implement Assembly Bill 1717. Do you have any questions regarding BOE's budget?
Thank you. Any questions from the members or comments? Please.
So I know we're going to get to this point a little bit later, but just looking at your outreach budget, I noticed that it did go up over a 5-year period from about $800,000 to $1.8 million. If you could address where the reasons for that, as well as what the money's for.
Right, and we do have staff that's going to be here when we get to the outreach area to address those specific questions regarding the outreach budget. Okay.
Are they here yet?
Yes. That's panel 4. Do you want to jump ahead?
I'd like to, well, since we're talking about budget.
Okay.
Hi, I'm William Hain. I'm the administrator of our outreach and customer service area.
Thank you.
And this is Maria Delgado, who's the manager in our outreach services area. The question you had is why it had doubled in the last 6 years?
If you can speak into the mic, please. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Within the last 6 years, we've had a number of programs that have caused the BOE outreach to focus not just on our taxpayer base, but also on the general public. Historically, our outreach was directed at people who were permit holders exclusively, with some general information out there. The last few years, we've had the fire fee implement, which was a general public, and we've also been doing a lot of the underground economy work with the use tax, which affects the general public and not the people who hold our permits. So the outreach efforts have expanded. As part of outreach, we have a statewide plan, really a taxpayer education responsibility as an agency, and then we also have some regional outreach that happens in each of the members' district based on the communities that they operate in and the industries that are important to that geographic area.
To your question about the expansion, what we discovered when we were researching this gap is the figures that were presented to you also included what our media services program, which is under the Outreach Services Division. That was, I believe, under number 2, under the outreach section, the media services was included in that as well. So their personnel services, the OE&E was in there. And also they were included in BCPs that we requested during that time. So with the assistance of our budget shop, we kind of figured out that that's probably the best, that's probably what we're looking at. Bill and I are getting up to speed really quickly here in terms of taking a look at the historical, the costs and the programs and, trying to get a handle on it. So I hope that's answered your question.
Well, just to get a little more specific, the additional $1 million, do they go to personnel? I'm not clear. Do they go to media? What did it,
well, it appears, so how we were able to, it said that 3.5 positions were established for Tax Gap 2, and they would have been reflected in that 2013-14 budget. Those positions expired at the end of June. Okay. So additionally, during the period of 2009 to 14, which was the period that the questions have covered, as I mentioned, media services was part of the division. So best we could figure the 3.5 positions from Tax Gap 2, 5 positions from AB 155, and 4 positions for media services that were included in the cross BCP were all included in that budget. Those budget figures that were presented in the initial round of responses.
Okay, I guess I'm not completely understanding your explanation. So with 3.5 positions, I know that does not total $1 million difference. So I'm trying to better understand. And in particular, the services line item seems to account for the majority of the difference, about $800,000. So
I believe when we did the math, that was pretty close to what we saw as well. And
okay, well, if you could, as a follow-up, send our office a breakdown of that math, I'd love to be able to see it on an annual basis as well as on a position-by-position basis.
sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Cooper?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a follow-up to Mr. Ting's question, can you talk more about how much each BOE member expended on outreach activities?
Is the budget related to the board members?
Yeah, we don't.
Yeah, it's part of the overhead.
We don't break it out individually by board member because there's the statewide component to the outreach program that affects statewide, and then there's each board member has their regional area, but we haven't broke out the outreach budget by board member district.
But beyond the statewide, obviously the statewide is going to each district, but beyond that, there's no breakout. It's all evenly.
Oh, beyond that,
Beyond the
beyond the
statewide
statewide
yeah.
program, each district has some information officers that are currently employed by the Sales and Use Tax Department that do the regional outreach. We have regional outreach stakeholder managers that they work with local communities, chambers of commerce, local business associations, local electeds to help us set up and put on our events, and also to have a voice in the community and to see the issues that are coming up and are prevalent in each of those communities. And so that's the regional portion of the outreach program. It's mostly spent on personnel.
Sure, but beyond that, can you tell me specifically what the member spent? Each member spent. Is it? There's no formula for that?
I do not have that figure. No. I do not have that. I'm sorry.
And then following up on Mr. Ting's question, I would like it because obviously going up that $1 million, I think there's somewhere you need to be able to break it out as far as the increase in the budget, as far as the outreach budget, with some specifics. I would like to know in which area. So I would like the same information you send Mr. Ting. I would like also.
But also broken out by board member district?
Yes, and also to be specific about the increase in the budget, where it went to. Because I know you gave a little bit of answer, but it was kind of generic. So I need you guys to drill down more deeply and to give us some more specifics on that. That would be helpful.
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Cooper, we also changed the lines in 2010. So Betty Yee, who was my predecessor, had a little bit different lines than I did. So I think, do you want to break it down current lines? Members based on today, since I just got here.
Sure, exactly.
Okay.
And that's not a problem with you. But I'm just curious just to find out and give us a snapshot of what it was.
Okay.
Also, could you break down specific efforts that around the BOE's outreach efforts in terms of use tax?
In use tax, we've done a number of mailers, we've done e-blasts, we have YouTube videos.
Media production did, the videos on that.
Yeah, I mean, we have, there's a number of efforts that are just, our direct outreach as we go out to small business seminars and things like that. I mean, that face-to-face. The media services does a lot of, they've done videos. We have that on our KBOE and our district offices. We have it available on our website. We have a use tax page, that provides information. So there's a number of efforts done by a number of staff throughout the agency in support of, the education, for use tax.
Within the departments, we've had like a use tax letter. We've had FTB. We've included a line and a chart to allow people to assess it based on their income for minor purchases they make over the internet. This has been part of trying to educate the general public towards this, and rather than just the permit holders.
I'd more follow-up from Ms. Murphy.
If you'd like to, Mr. Cooper has a question.
Just a question more about, in specifics about general outreach activities versus regional outreach activities.
General outreach activities generally, as far as like events, we put on small business seminars throughout the state. We put on nonprofit seminars throughout the state. We try to work with, so statewide efforts are larger events where we have more publicity that goes out. We have a set thing where we work with our partners in FTB, IRS, and EDD to create a small business day, more or less, to educate them about different responsibilities they have as a new business owner. One of the things is with the constant turnover of businesses in the state of California, we have about 180,000 new permittees per year. So it's not like we can just do a couple of events and have the message out there. It's a constant the message has to constantly be reiterated again and again. And one of those things with communication is, as soon as you think they're starting to get it, or you're getting tired of delivering that message, that's when they're just starting to get it. So it's kind of one of these things that requires a repeated effort. Again, and it's, we can't do like one-time outreach. The program area would maybe develop some outreach and put it on the web and develop a page, but then they kind of wash their hands of it, more or less. I mean, because of the work of implementation, and that is done. And when outreach takes over, is getting the word out to the different groups, different ethnicities, the different geographic areas throughout the state.
Let me give an example in regards to how it is that that a statewide outreach effort then is backed up by regional. For instance, we may be doing an issue, for instance, with restaurants. And so the statewide effort of outreach will be develop the web page, to develop the backup material for that particular issue, all the information that needs to go there for a central location that outreach then develops that is used in that way. And then there can be a series then of regional events, whether it be a business seminar that you refer people then to that website. So you're kind of using a regional effort to refer to the statewide effort that outreach did. Or, for instance, one of the issues I'll touch on when I talk a little bit is I'll do a telephone town hall to my restaurants, where then, again, that's a regional effort, but we're pointing them back to the statewide outreach effort. So there really isn't a specific, I think there's very little specific statewide outreach that isn't connected then back to the regional effort, because the regional effort is where it is that we actually touch the taxpayers and the permit holders.
As far as the budget goes, if you can break it down, what percentage is geared towards general outreach versus regional outreach?
Yeah, again, I think that they'll have to work through that and see. Again, sometimes it's difficult to tell because, in fact, I'm going to give you guys, when it comes to my effort, a flyer. The flyer is done between a couple of members. So a lot of times we'll go together regionally on those issues. Sure. Because, again, our district. So we can get at least close in that regard. But the key issue, I think, to remember is that there's not this statewide effort of outreach that just is on its own, but it really works because of the regional efforts in order to get taxpayers and permit holders to what it is that we were saying statewide. And the importance of that is because the BOE needs to speak with one voice. And so regionally we talk about it, but then we steer them back toward then the statewide effort or the statewide communication.
The BOE mothership does send out things statewide.
Yes, we do.
So there's a way to break that down versus statewide versus somewhat regionally. It's not all lumped in together. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Then I just have another question about as far as district outreach personnel. Who do they report to?
The regional outreach stakeholder managers report to the outreach office, and then some of the information officers report to the assistant chief of field in sales and use tax department.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Ting, I think you wanted to have some follow-up questions.
Right. Last follow-up question for you, then for Ms. Murphy, was around the fire fee. If you could go through the outreach on the fire fee.
Oh.
Well, there were, excuse me, I'm sorry. As I recall, there was a number of mailers and that were very specific and targeted to the state of California. I mean, anybody who was in the state, I'm sorry.
The state fire prevention zone, whatever.
The BOE prepared,
The SRA,
the SRA.
State Responsibility Area, excuse me.
No, there was quite a work plan that was executed to let everybody know that it was coming, what the mailing would be done, the mailing schedule. There was by county. So there was news releases. There was work with the news outlets to really make sure that the word was getting out at the lowest, at local level.
On that issue, it was really a critical time for us because remember what happened is basically when the fire fee went into effect, it was 800,000 properties. You've got to remember, just for perspective, we barely have just over that number in terms of permits. So it was a huge group, and it's a group that never had any connection with the BOE before. And so they get a letter from the BOE and they say, who's this? In addition to that, remember what happened is once that bill was passed, then we had to communicate, and people had 30 days from when the bill was sent to respond to it. And these people were totally unaware. So actually, one of the efforts that we did is we actually, during the first time, we sent out, we knew when the bills were going to go out, and we actually sent out a pre-notice telling them, hey, in so many days, you're going to be getting this. Because again, I guess I can touch on this, but I'll say it again now, and that is the fire fee, but basically the people who own a fire fee, it's just a bit over $100. So it's really important for us to get voluntary compliance because we can burn up $100 real fast trying to go ahead and collect somebody who didn't pay. So the upfront communication was really essential for us in that effort.
Thank you. And were there increased personnel costs because of the fire fee?
I think Edna can answer that in regards to what was part of the BCP for that.
Thank you.
Why don't you guys sit over here?
I think they're going to be.
Oh, no? All right.
Yeah.
I can come back.
There's the folks coming.
I think you should. Yeah, as long as you can keep coming back.
Yeah, so yes, there were substantial increases to our personnel because, again, like was mentioned, these were new taxpayers who were not familiar with the BOE, and it was so substantial. It was administered by CAL FIRE, so they actually was the one who retained the list. When the program was first initiated, we were already a year behind, so we had to mail out 2 mailers in the same year to do a catch-up, and so there was a lot of correspondence that went out to the taxpayer to kind of explain to them what was happening because this was something that was very new. It was a new fee. There was a lot of concerns or questions on whether or not they had to pay, and if they didn't pay, whether they could petition. So we really did a lot of efforts to make them understand that it was important for them to pay and that, if they wanted to petition it, how they needed to do that, how to go about it. I don't have the exact figures of how much staff was increased by that, but I can get you that information specifically.
That would be great.
Okay.
And my follow-up question to you was regarding the district offices. I noticed that the district offices were fairly evenly distributed, but in terms of accounts, obviously each district has significant variance in accounts. So could you walk us through how you do the district offices? Like, for example, I know for Ms. Ma, her district is fairly large, but she doesn't have a district office south of San Jose, and she goes all the way down to Santa Barbara, is it, Ventura? So it's a fairly big geography without any service.
So I may need Jeff to come up here and explain to me how the accounts work. So.
Good afternoon. I'm Jeff McGuire. I'm the Deputy Director for the Sales and Use Tax Department. Yeah, you're right. Our taxpayers are not all in the same place in California. They're not evenly distributed. So when we look at how we staff our offices, or actually where we locate our offices, we look at really primarily where our concentration of taxpayers are. And actually back in the 1990s, as we moved to more technology, we used to have a lot more offices all over the state, lots of little tiny satellite offices because people had to do all their business with us primarily in person. And so as we moved towards call center with the 800 number, online services like e-registration, e-filing, e-payments, anything you can do, you can pretty much do through the web with us now. We've really tried to concentrate our offices primarily to put our staff where most of our taxpayers are, because our staff in our field offices are primarily auditors and collectors. Then we do have the public service aspect with registration and cashiering. So primarily our auditor and collectors, we're trying to to place them, which is actually closest to the businesses that they're dealing with. So you'll see like more offices concentrated in the Los Angeles area, more offices concentrated in the San Francisco area, San Diego, in like the eastern part of the California, which is much more spread out and more rural. We have fewer offices, and they're a little bit smaller, but they're a little more spread out. So we really try to do it so that we can meet the needs of our taxpayers, and we're also getting our staff closest to where the work is that they're going to do that they need to get to.
So as you were consolidating offices, what was the philosophy, I guess? Where did you determine, from what offices did you close and where did you move them?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that really occurred back in the early 90s primarily, and so kind of I wasn't directly involved with that, but I think it was we just had satellite offices all over, like Susanville, Marysville, Placerville, South Lake Tahoe, places where you needed someone, when they had to come in person, it needed to be close, and so really it was primarily closing all of those smaller offices and primarily going more regionalizing in the larger metropolitan areas, and again with the idea of taxpayers could then start using the mail to do registration. They didn't have to come in, and then also be providing the phone service first, and then in the 2000s we really ramped up the online services over the internet. So I'm not really detailed familiar with exactly which ones they decided to close at the time, but it was primarily closing these tiny satellite offices that had like 2 or 3 people in them.
So in terms of your auditors and collectors, I think it makes complete sense to be in the district offices. Can you give us a sense of the number of auditors and number of collectors you have in the organization?
Yeah, in the sales tax.
It was hard. I know you broke it down, but just hard to get a sense of the
So I think
number.
I have my numbers here somewhere. So in the sales and use tax department, we have 842 auditors that are spread out not only in our in-state offices, but we have a couple hundred that are in our out-of-state offices because we have an office in Chicago, New York, and Houston. On the collection side, we have 502 collectors in our department. Some of those are regionalized. We do some functions a little more centrally in our collections, but the vast majority are actually out in our field offices that do those. So they're closer to if they need to make field calls, it's a less cost for us on their travel time and costs.
So I'm sorry, you said, and for auditors, it's 842 in sales and use, or this is department-wide?
That's just sales and use. There's 907 department-wide. There's 64 in our special taxes area on auditors.
In terms of collectors, it's 502?
502 in sales and use tax and 67 in special taxes for a total of 569, if I did my math right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any more questions at this point? Great. So let's, moving forward to panel 2, the supplemental report on costs related to cigarette and tobacco products. This was an issue that started out last year in Subcommittee 4 because we heard concerns about whether the administrative and collection fees on the program were appropriate or not. And we know that the county commissions have a cap on the administrative fees, but there are no such caps at the Board of Equalization. So we wanted to get an opportunity to hear from you.
Seth Kirstein with the Legislative Analyst's Office. I'll be providing you with a brief overview of BOE's cigarette and tobacco programs. I'll be talking about 2 distinct programs that BOE has, a tax program and a licensing program. My comments will run roughly parallel to the handout we've distributed, which is also available on our website. I'll start with the tax program. The centerpiece of that program is the excise tax on cigarettes, which is 87 cents a pack. The state also imposes a tax on other tobacco products with a rate that BOE adjusts every year, currently about 29% of the wholesale price. BOE collects both of those taxes from distributors, so they've already been paid by the time those products reach retailers. In the 2013-14 fiscal year, the cigarette tax raised about $750 million, and the tax on other tobacco products raised about $90 million. As you can see in the graph on page 2 of our handout, most of the money raised by these taxes goes to 2 special funds created by ballot measures. Prop 10, which funds early childhood programs, and Proposition 99, which funds health-related programs. A small portion goes to the general fund and to the breast cancer fund. The administration's proposed 2015-16 spending on the cigarette and tobacco tax program is $25 million total from all funds. We have a graph on page 5 of the handout that shows the breakdown of proposed spending from each fund. Now I'll turn from the tax program and tell you a little bit about the licensing program. Since 2004, state law has required all retailers, wholesalers, and distributors of cigarettes and tobacco to be licensed by the state. To get a license, you have to pay a fee, meet some record-keeping requirements, and consent to occasional inspections conducted by BOE. Turning to page 7 of the handout, we have a graph showing the difference between the administrative costs of the licensing program and the total amount of the licensing fees. At the very beginning of the program, the licensing fees, plus the various fines and penalties assessed for violations, were the only source of program funding. That changed in 2006 when the governor's budget proposed funding the program not only from the licensing fees, but also from the cigarette and tobacco tax revenue that goes to the 4 funds I was mentioning earlier. At that time, the legislature approved that change on a temporary basis, and later on, the 2009-10 budget approved it on an ongoing basis. In the coming year, the administration proposes spending $10 million on the licensing program and allocating the costs according to this recent practice. Last year, some representatives from Proposition 10 programs expressed concerns about the administrative costs of BOE's cigarette and tobacco programs, as well as the allocation of those costs. The legislature responded to those concerns by approving supplemental reporting language that set 3 requirements for BOE. The first requirement was to submit a report describing BOE's expenditures on these programs and explaining how the costs are allocated across funds. The second requirement was to convene a stakeholder meeting to discuss funding options for the licensing program, which was the main concern raised last year. The third and final requirement was to submit a report describing at least 3 options for funding the licensing program, including at least one that would increase the share of costs covered by licensing fees and another that would increase the share covered by the general fund. That concludes my presentation, and at this time I'd be happy to take questions if you have any.